For over a century, the Bellgrave name had been synonymous in the city of Ravenbrook with wealth and prestige. Their imposing stone mansion on Prosperity Hill overlooked the town like a sentinel, a daily reminder of their influence. In the center of town stood the Bellgrave National Bank. Its neoclassical architecture was deliberately reminiscent of ancient temples where people once worshipped gods. Here, the people of Ravenbrook worshipped something else, money and the family that controlled it. During their evening walks through the bank's marble halls after closing time, Henry Bellgrave would tell his son Alexander, "When you control the money, you control everything. Remember that, son. Remember who you are." Henry Bellgrave, at 63, was the picture of old money and power, his silver hair always immaculately styled. He wore bespoke suits from London and carried a gold pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather, the founder of Bellgrave National. Decades of making decisions that shaped the town's destiny had given his voice a weight of authority. Silently, Alexander nodded. He was 35 and had spent his entire life being groomed for this legacy. Yet, the passion for banking that burned in his father's eyes was something he had never felt. Still, he played his part, Harvard Business School graduate, impeccably dressed junior executive, beautiful son. The weight of family expectation was his constant companion. "The quarterly board meeting is next week," Henry continued, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. "The Harrington acquisition will be finalized. At last, our influence will extend beyond Ravenbrook." A rare smile crossed his typically stern face. The Bellgraves weren't just bankers. They were Ravenbrook's unofficial rulers, deciding which businesses received loans, which developments were approved, which families prospered, and which quietly disappeared from the social register. For generations, no major decision in Ravenbrook happened without Bellgrave approval. As they reached the bank's grand entrance, Henry paused to admire the family crest carved above the doorway, an eagle clutching a key in its talons. "Legacy, Alexander. Everything we do is for the legacy." What neither of them noticed was the woman watching them from across the street, her eyes fixed on the bank with an intensity that spoke of something more than casual interest. For this moment, Eleanor Pierce had waited years. And now the time had finally come. Eleanor Pierce wasn't born to wealth or privilege. Growing up in the working-class Eastern District of Ravenbrook, she had witnessed firsthand how the Bellgrave family's decisions rippled through the community. Her own father, once a respected accountant at the bank, had died in disgrace after being accused of embezzlement, an accusation he denied until his dying day. "They framed him," her mother would whisper in their small kitchen, careful that neighbors wouldn't hear. "Your father was going to expose something, and they couldn't allow that." Through college, through her accounting degree, and through the years of carefully constructing her new identity, Eleanor had carried those words with her. Now at 32, she had finally secured a position at Bellgrave National, working in the records department, a position that few noticed, but that gave her access to the bank's internal systems. Monday morning, she arrived early, nodding politely to the security guard, who barely looked up from his newspaper. Located in the basement level, away from the ornate lobbies and executive offices, was the records department. It was where the bank's history was stored, physical documents, old ledgers, and files that had yet to be fully digitized. "Good morning, Eleanor," said Martin, her supervisor, a man who had worked in the records department for nearly 40 years. A lifetime spent in the fluorescent-lit basement, away from sunlight, was evident in his hunched posture and pale complexion. "There's a new project coming down from upstairs. They're finally letting us organize the founders' archives." Though her heart raced, Eleanor kept her expression neutral. "The founders' archives. Clarence Bellgrave's personal records." Martin nodded. "In preparation for the bank's 125th anniversary next year, Mr. Henry wants a comprehensive history published. Most of it's in the secure room. I'm trusting you with this because of your attention to detail." Careful not to let her hand tremble, Eleanor accepted the key to the secure storage room. The opportunity she had been waiting for had finally arrived after 2 years of working her way into a position of trust. The secure storage room was rarely accessed, a climate-controlled chamber where the oldest and most sensitive documents were kept. As she unlocked the heavy door, she was hit with the musty scent of aged paper and leather bindings. Before her stretched rows of shelves, laden with boxes and leather-bound ledgers. History, or at least the Bellgrave version of it, preserved in ink and paper. Methodically, she moved, cataloging as she went, the perfect employee. But her eyes scanned for specific dates, 1987 to 1989, the years her father had worked in the upper echelons of the bank before his fall from grace. It was in the third hour of searching that she found it, a leather-bound ledger with the simple marking Special Account CB. The initials could have stood for Clarence Bellgrave, the founder, but the book was much newer. Carefully, she opened it, and her breath caught as she began to read the handwritten entries, names, dates, amounts. It was a secondary accounting system showing massive transfers to offshore accounts under code names. Next to several entries was another set of initials, RP, Robert Pierce, her father. But these weren't records of embezzlement. They were records of the Bellgraves' own systematic theft with notes indicating manufactured evidence against problematic employees, including her father. Now, her hands shaking, Eleanor used her phone to carefully photograph each page. This wasn't just about clearing her father's name anymore. This was bigger than she had imagined. What she didn't notice was the small camera in the corner of the secure room, its red light blinking as it captured her discovery. In his top-floor office, Alexander Bellgrave was reviewing acquisition documents when his phone buzzed with a security alert. The system automatically flagged unusual behavior in sensitive areas. He frowned at the notification, an employee spending excessive time in the secure archives, accessing documents outside her assigned catalog range. Pulling up the security feed, Alexander watched as Eleanor Pierce methodically photographed pages from an old ledger. Something about her focused intensity made him uneasy. He ran a background check through the bank's system. Eleanor Pierce, impeccable credentials, hired 2 years ago, excellent performance reviews. He was about to dismiss the alert when the facial recognition software offered an additional data point, 98% matched to Margaret Pierce with a note indicating maiden name connection to Robert Pierce, former employee terminated for embezzlement in 1989. Sitting back, Alexander felt his mind racing. Robert Pierce. The name was vaguely familiar from bank history, but something else tugged at his memory. He opened his private files, searching through family documents until he found it, a letter from his grandfather to his father mentioning Pierce as a regrettable but necessary sacrifice. Troubled, he closed the file. The Bellgrave family had secrets. He had always known that, every wealthy family did. But he had always believed in the bank's fundamental integrity. Or at least he had convinced himself he did. Mr. Bellgrave. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your father is here. Quickly, Alexander closed the security feed as Henry Bellgrave strode into the office without knocking, his presence immediately filling the room. The Harrington papers need your signature, Henry said without preamble, placing a folder on Alexander's desk. Their board approved our final offer this morning. Nodding, Alexander picked up his pen. Actually, father, something's come up in security. An employee in records. Handle it, Henry cut him off. That's your responsibility now. I'm focused on the expansion. He checked his gold pocket watch. The governor is expecting us for dinner at 7 o'clock. Don't be late. After his father left, Alexander returned to the security feed. Eleanor Pierce had left the secure room, carefully returning the ledger to its place. Her expression was composed, professional. But there was something in her eyes now, a certainty, a purpose. Alexander had spent his life learning to read people. It was essential in banking to know when someone was hiding something. Eleanor Pierce was hiding something big, and somehow he knew it involved his family. He should report this to his father immediately. That would be the expected response, the beautiful son protecting the family legacy. Instead, he found himself accessing her employee file, looking for her contact information. Perhaps there was another approach, one that wouldn't immediately involve his father. Because somewhere deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, Alexander Bellgrave had questions about his family's legacy, too. Eleanor's apartment was small, but meticulously organized, located in a renovated industrial building in what real estate agents optimistically called up-and-coming West Side. It was a far cry from the Bellgrave mansion, but it was hers. Paid for with her own honestly earned money. She locked the door behind her, drew the blinds, and only then allowed her professional composure to fall away. Her hands shook as she connected her phone to her laptop, transferring the photographs of the ledger pages to an encrypted folder. The evidence was extraordinary, not just her father's framing, but decades of financial manipulation, blackmail, and fraud. The Bellgraves hadn't just built their fortune through clever banking. They'd systematically eliminated threats, manufactured evidence against whistleblowers, and hidden their tactics behind a veneer of respectability. The ledger contained it all, the special accounting that the official books never showed. A knock at her door made her freeze. Checking the peephole, she was stunned to see Alexander Bellgrave standing in the hallway, still in his tailored suit, but looking decidedly uncomfortable in the building's industrial setting. Her mind raced. How had he found her? What did he know? She closed her laptop, hiding it under a sofa cushion before opening the door just enough to see him clearly. "Mr. Bellgrave," she said, her voice impressively steady. "This is unexpected." Alexander looked directly at her, his expression unreadable. "M. Pierce. Or should I say, Miss Pierce, daughter of Robert Pierce. I think we need to talk." A cold fear washed over Eleanor, but she maintained her composure. "I'm not sure what this is about." "I think you do." His voice was low, controlled. "The secure archives, the ledger, the photographs. Security captures everything, Ms. Pierce." For a moment, she considered denying everything, but the evidence was clearly against her. Instead, she made a quick decision. "You've come alone. No security, no police. You're curious about what I found." Something flickered in his eyes, surprised perhaps at her directness. "May I come in?" Against her better judgment, Eleanor stepped aside. Alexander Bellgrave entered her apartment, looking oddly out of place among her modest furnishings. He declined to sit when she offered. "You should know," he said after a moment, "that the security alert came directly to me. I haven't informed anyone else yet." "Why not?" Eleanor asked, watching him carefully. Alexander hesitated. And in that hesitation, Eleanor saw something unexpected: doubt. This wasn't a man coming to threaten her into silence. This was something else. "That ledger," he finally said. "It was kept by my grandfather, wasn't it? Charles Bellgrave." Slowly, Eleanor nodded. "Special accounts, offshore transfers, evidence manufacturing, including against my father, who worked as a senior accountant at your bank until he was framed for embezzlement in 1989. Pacing her small living room, Alexander showed conflict in his movement. "I found a letter," he said finally. "From my grandfather to my father, mentioning your father as a necessary sacrifice. I've always known there were methods that the older generation employed that wouldn't stand up to modern scrutiny. But this isn't about outdated business practices," Eleanor interrupted, her composure finally breaking. "This is about systematic fraud and deliberate destruction of innocent people's lives. My father died in disgrace, his reputation ruined. He couldn't even get a job as a store cashier after your family finished with him." Stopping his pacing, Alexander faced her directly. "Show me." It was a pivotal moment. Revealing her evidence to a Bellgrave could end any chance of justice. But something in his expression, a genuine disturbance, made her reach for her laptop. One by one, she showed him the photographs of the ledger pages, explaining the coding system she'd already begun to decipher based on her accounting background. Alexander's face grew increasingly troubled as the evidence mounted. "This goes beyond my grandfather," he said quietly. "Some of these entries are recent, within the last 5 years. Your father, Eleanor confirmed. The practices continued. They probably still do. Running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, Alexander disheveled it for the first time Eleanor had ever seen. I need to think about this. What are you going to do? Eleanor asked, closing her laptop. Run back to your father? Have me fired, discredited? That seems to be the Bellgrave way of handling problems. His eyes snapped to hers. A flash of anger, quickly controlled. You don't know me, Miss Pierce. Don't presume to know what I'll do. He moved toward the door, then paused. Don't do anything with those photographs. Not yet. Give me 48 hours. Why should I trust you? Alexander looked back at her, and for the first time, she saw past the polished Bellgrave exterior to something more complex beneath. Because I'm not my father or my grandfather. And maybe I need to prove that to myself as much as to you. After he left, Ella Laner sat in silence, weighing her options. She had never expected this reaction from Alexander Bellgrave. She had anticipated denial, threats, perhaps even an attempt to buy her silence. But not this troubled uncertainty, this hint of a conscience. She picked up a framed photograph from her side table, her father in happier days, laughing at a family picnic. I don't know if I can trust him, Dad, she whispered. But he might be our best chance at clearing your name. What she couldn't know was that Alexander Bellgrave was having a similar conversation with his own conscience as he drove back to his penthouse apartment, the carefully constructed certainties of his life beginning to unravel. The Bellgrave mansion was imposing at any time, but at night, with its Gothic architecture illuminated by strategic lighting, it resembled a fortress more than a home. Alexander parked his car in the circular driveway, noticing the governor's official vehicle already there. The dinner engagement, he had completely forgotten. Inside, the sounds of conversation and classical music drifted from the formal dining room. Alexander straightened his tie, composed his features, and entered the lion's den. Alexander, finally, his father said by way of greeting. The governor was just asking about the new community investment initiative. Governor Wilson, a robust man with the practiced smile of a career politician, raised his glass in greeting. Alexander, your father's been telling me about the expansion plans. Very impressive. Alexander went through the motions of the evening, discussing business, laughing at the right moments, playing the role of the beautiful son and heir. But his mind was elsewhere, processing what he had seen in Ella Laner's apartment. The evidence was compelling, damning. If even half of what that ledger contained was accurate, the Bellgrave legacy was built on crimes that could still be prosecuted. You seem distracted, his mother, Evelyn Bellgrave, whispered as she passed him in the hallway between dinner and dessert. At 60, she remained elegant and perceptive, the perfect banking matriarch. Just thinking about the Harrington acquisition, he lied smoothly. Evelyn studied him with eyes that had always seen too much. You've been different lately, questioning things that shouldn't be questioned. What does that mean, Mother? She glanced toward the dining room, ensuring they were alone. It means that legacy requires certainty, Alexander. Doubt is a luxury our family cannot afford. She touched his cheek in a rare display of affection. Your father built on what his father created. You'll do the same. That's how dynasties endure. Later, as the evening wound down and the governor departed, Henry summoned Alexander to his study, a wood-paneled room that had remained unchanged for 3 generations, filled with leather-bound books and hunting trophies. The final paperwork for Harrington will be ready tomorrow, Henry said, pouring himself a glass of scotch without offering one to his son. Once signed, we'll control 60% of the financial services in 3 counties. By next year, we'll be ready to move into the state capital. Alexander watched his father, the confidence, the absolute certainty of his right to power. Had there ever been a moment of doubt in Henry Bellgrave's life? A moment where he questioned the methods used to maintain the family's position. What happened to Robert Pierce? The question left Alexander's mouth before he could reconsider. Henry's hand paused midway to his lips, the only indication of surprise. Pierce. That embezzlement case from decades ago. Why on earth would you ask about that? I found a letter from grandfather calling him a necessary sacrifice. It seemed odd phrasing for an embezzler. Henry set down his glass, his expression hardening. You've been going through private family correspondence. I was researching for the anniversary project, Alexander lied. It caught my attention. Henry studied him for a long moment. Pierce was getting too close to information he shouldn't have accessed. Your grandfather did what was necessary to protect the bank. By framing an innocent man. By protecting what matters. Henry snapped. This family, this legacy. Pierce was nothing. A middle-class accountant with delusions of moral superiority. He threatened everything we built. Alexander felt something shift inside him. A foundational belief crumbling. So he was innocent. Henry moved closer, his voice dropping. Innocent? In this world, don't be naive, Alexander. There are those who build power and those who serve it. We are Bellgraves. We don't ask permission. We don't apologize. And we don't explain ourselves to anyone. He picked up his scotch again. I suggest you remember that before questioning family decisions again. Alexander left the study with his world tilting on its axis. All his life he had accepted the family mythology that the Bellgraves prospered because they were smarter, worked harder, deserved their position. Now he faced the reality that their dynasty was built on deliberate cruelty and fraud. In his car, he pulled out his phone and did something he never thought he would do. He texted Eleanor Pierce, "You're right about everything. We need to talk tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. Riverside Park. Come alone." The morning mist still hung over the river when Eleanor arrived at the park. She had barely slept, alternating between hope that Alexander might actually help her and fear that she was walking into a trap. She had taken precautions, the evidence was backed up in multiple locations, and she had left instructions with a trusted friend in case she didn't return. Alexander was already there, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. He looked different. His usual perfectly pressed suit was replaced by casual clothes, his hair slightly disheveled. More striking was the change in his demeanor. The confident banking scion was replaced by a man visibly wrestling with difficult decisions. "Thank you for coming," he said as she approached. Eleanor sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "Did you speak to your father?" "Not directly about the ledger, but enough to confirm what you showed me." He turned to face her. "I've spent my entire life believing in the Bellgrave name, preparing to carry on the legacy. In one day, you've made me question everything." "That wasn't my intention," Eleanor said. "Honestly, I just wanted justice for my father." Alexander looked out at the river. "My father sees power as an entitlement, the right to decide other people's fates without consequence." He paused. "I always thought I was different, more ethical, but I've been complicit, haven't I? Accepting the benefits while ignoring how they were obtained." Eleanor watched him, searching for any sign of deception. Banking heirs didn't have moral awakenings overnight. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Bellgrave?" "Alexander," he corrected. "And I'm suggesting we work together. That ledger contains evidence of crimes committed by my family, but it also implicates board members, local officials, even certain regulators. This goes beyond your father's case." "You want to expose your own family?" Eleanor asked skeptically. "I want to do what's right," he replied. "Maybe for the first time in my life." He met her gaze directly. "But we need to be careful. These people, my father included, they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens them." Eleanor considered his words. Working with a Bellgrave was the last thing she had expected, but Alexander's insider position could be invaluable. "If we do this, I need to know you're committed. No matter where this leads." Alexander nodded slowly. "The Harrington acquisition is happening this week. It's my father's crowning achievement, the deal that will expand Bellgrave influence beyond Ravenbrook. If we're going to act, it needs to be before that deal closes. Why? Because once it closes, my father's political connections will be even stronger. The governor, the state attorney general, they're all involved in this expansion. We'd be going against an even more powerful entity. Eleanor felt the weight of the moment. This was no longer just about clearing her father's name. It was about exposing decades of corruption that had shaped an entire community. We'll need more evidence, she said finally. The ledger is a start, but we need current documentation. Proof that these practices continued under your father. Leaning forward and lowering his voice, though no one was nearby, Alexander said, I have access to everything. The problem will be gathering it without alerting my father or our security systems. And we'll need to decide who to take this to, Eleanor added. Local authorities might be compromised if your family has the influence you describe. Federal banking regulators, Alexander suggested. And I have a contact at the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI, someone outside my father's sphere of influence. As they continued to plan, neither noticed the black sedan parked at the edge of the park, or the telephoto lens capturing their conversation from a distance. Martin, Eleanor's supervisor in the records department, had always seemed like a harmless, career-minded middle manager, someone who had found his small place in the Bellgrave empire and was content to stay there. What Eleanor didn't know was that Martin had been Henry Bellgrave's eyes and ears in the records department for decades, tasked with ensuring that certain historical documents remained buried. The alert about Eleanor's activities in the secure room had gone to him as well as to Alexander. Unlike Alexander, Martin had immediately reported to Henry. Pierce. Henry had repeated the name, triggering old memories. Any relation to Robert Pierce? Martin had nodded. His daughter, sir. She was very thorough in creating her new identity, but our background check missed the connection. Henry's face had darkened. And my son knows about this breach. The security alert would have gone to him automatically. Now Henry Bellgrave sat in his study looking at the surveillance photos of Alexander and Eleanor meeting in the park. His son's betrayal stung more than he cared to admit. He had always sensed Alexander's reluctance, his lack of true commitment to the family's methods, but he had never expected outright treachery. What would you like me to do, sir? Asked Reynolds, his head of security, a former military man who handled problems that required absolute discretion. Henry considered his options. The Harrington deal was days away from closing, the culmination of years of planning. If allegations of fraud emerged now, it could all collapse. Worse, it could lead to criminal investigations that might reach beyond Robert Pierce's case to more recent activities. Find out what they know and what they're planning, Henry ordered. I want their communications monitored, their movements tracked discreetly. And if they attempt to contact authorities? Henry's expression hardened. Prevent it. Use whatever methods necessary. After Reynolds left, Henry opened his safe and removed a similar ledger to the one Eleanor had discovered, the continuation of his father's system, recording the special arrangements that had ensured Bellgrave dominance for decades, the offshore accounts, the manufactured evidence against threats, the bribes disguised as consulting fees. It was all there. The true history of how power was maintained. He should destroy it, he knew. But like his father before him, Henry believed in keeping records. Information was power, and these ledgers contained leverage over dozens of influential people, insurance policies that had protected the Bellgrave interests for generations. Henry closed the ledger, his decision made. His son had chosen his side. Now he would learn what it meant to stand against the full force of Bellgrave power. Alexander's penthouse apartment reflected his conflicted nature, expensively furnished but impersonal, more like a high-end hotel suite than a home. As he reviewed the files he had discreetly copied from the bank's restricted servers, he felt an unfamiliar sensation, fear. The documents confirmed everything the ledger had suggested and more. His father's management of the bank had continued the family tradition of eliminating obstacles through any means necessary. The Harrington acquisition itself was riddled with irregularities, inflated valuations, hidden liabilities, even evidence of coercion against board members who had initially opposed the sale. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, "We need to move faster. Someone accessed my work computer remotely this afternoon." Alexander felt a chill. If his father suspected something, they had even less time than he thought. He texted back, "Can you get away for a few days? Tell no one." Her response was immediate. "Already packed." "Where?" He gave her the address of a lake house the family owned but rarely used, located 2 hours from Ravenbrook. It wasn't in the Bellgrave name. His grandfather had purchased it through a shell company decades ago as a discreet meeting place for sensitive business discussions. As he packed a bag, Alexander considered how dramatically his life had changed in just 2 days. He had gone from heir apparent to whistleblower. From defending the family legacy to dismantling it. The strangest part was how right it felt, as if he had been waiting his entire life to finally make a choice that was truly his own. His phone rang. His father. Alexander stared at the screen, knowing that answering would require him to lie convincingly. He had never been good at deceiving his father. He let it go to voicemail. Moments later, a text arrived, "The Harrington signing has been moved up. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., your presence is required. No excuses." The accelerated timeline could only mean one thing: his father suspected something. Alexander grabbed his bag and headed for the door only to find Reynolds, his father's security chief, standing in the hallway. "Mr. Bellgrave," Reynolds said, his expression neutral. "Your father sent me to escort you to the mansion. He's called an emergency family meeting." Alexander forced a calm he didn't feel. "At this hour? Can't it wait until morning?" "I'm afraid he was quite insistent, sir." Alexander knew Reynolds had known him since childhood. The man had always been unfailingly polite, professional, and absolutely loyal to Henry Bellgrave. If his father had ordered Reynolds to bring Alexander in, refusal wasn't an option. "Let me get my jacket," Alexander said, stepping back into his apartment. Once inside, he quickly sent Eleanor a warning text, "Change of plans, compromised. Go to backup location. Trust no one." He deleted the message thread just as Reynolds appeared in the doorway. "Shall we, sir?" The drive to the Bellgrave mansion was tense and silent. Alexander's mind raced through scenarios, none of them good. His father was many things, but never impulsive. An emergency meeting meant Henry had evidence, perhaps of Alexander's meeting with Eleanor, perhaps of the files he had accessed. The mansion was fully lit despite the late hour. As Reynolds escorted him to his father's study, Alexander noticed additional security personnel, not the regular house staff, but hard-faced men with the unmistakable bearing of ex-military or law enforcement. His father was not alone in the study. Seated across from Henry was Martin from the records department, looking decidedly uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings. On the desk between them lay the ledger, the original that Eleanor had discovered. "Alexander," Henry said, his voice dangerously calm. "I believe you've taken an interest in our family history recently, particularly our methods of dealing with threats." Alexander met his father's gaze steadily. "I've been learning a lot about the family business lately." Henry nodded to Reynolds, who closed the study door, leaving the four of them isolated. "Martin here has been quite helpful in explaining how Ms. Pierce discovered this ledger. What he couldn't explain was why my son, upon receiving a security alert about this breach, chose to meet with her privately rather than inform me. Perhaps I wanted to understand the situation before acting," Alexander replied. Henry's laugh held no humor. "Understand? There's nothing to understand. She's Pierce's daughter here for revenge, and you're aiding her. The question is why?" "Maybe because she's right," Alexander said, finally dropping any pretense. What was done to her father was wrong. What's documented in that ledger is criminal, and it's still happening, isn't it? The Harrington deal. It's just the latest example. Henry's expression darkened. Criminal. We created prosperity in this town. We built something lasting. Do you think that happens by following every petty rule created by bureaucrats? Power requires decisive action, Alexander. I thought I had raised you to understand that. You raised me to continue a corrupt system, Alexander shot back. To believe I was entitled to decide other people's fates because of our name. Henry stood, his control slipping. Where is she? Where is Piesa's daughter now? Safe from you. Henry nodded to Reynolds, who produced a tablet showing a GPS map with a blinking dot. Your car has always been tracked, Alexander. Standard security protocol for executives. She's heading north on Route 16. He turned to Reynolds. Intercept her. Alexander felt a surge of panic. Leave her alone. She's not the problem here. She became the problem the moment she accessed that ledger, Henry replied coldly. Just like her father became a problem when he discovered discrepancies in our international accounts. Some lessons, it seems, run in families. Alexander moved toward the door only to find his path blocked by Reynolds. Get out of my way. You're not going anywhere until this situation is contained, Henry said. Martin, you're dismissed. Remember our agreement. The records manager scurried out, leaving Alexander alone with his father and Reynolds. What are you going to do? Alexander demanded. Frame Eleanor like you framed her father. Add another victim to the Bellgrave legacy. Henry's expression was stone. I'm going to protect what our family built. What your grandfather built. What generations of Bellgraves sacrificed to create. He stepped closer to his son. The question is whether you'll finally embrace your responsibilities or continue this childish rebellion. Alexander looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw not the powerful, confident figure he had feared and respected his entire life, but a man willing to destroy lives to maintain his position, a man so accustomed to power that he saw it as his natural right. I've made my choice, Alexander said quietly. Henry studied him for a long moment, then nodded to Reynolds. Take him to the lake house. Keep him there until after the Harrington signing tomorrow. No communications, no exceptions. As Reynolds led him out, Alexander glanced back at his father, standing alone in the study with the damning ledger. For the first time, Henry Bellgrave looked old, a man desperately trying to hold on to a world that was slipping away from him. Eleanor realized she was being followed about 40 minutes outside of Ravenbrook. The black SUV had maintained a consistent distance behind her through 3 turns, including a deliberate detour she had taken as a precaution. Alexander's warning text had been clear. Their plan was compromised. The backup location they had discussed was a motel outside the next town, selected specifically because it had no security cameras and accepted cash without ID, the kind of place that catered to people who didn't want to be found. She took a sudden exit, watching as the SUV followed. No longer any doubt. Thinking quickly, Eleanor pulled into a 24-hour truck stop, parking where multiple security cameras were visible. Her pursuers wouldn't risk a confrontation in such a public place with surveillance. Inside, she ordered coffee and considered her options. The evidence was secure. She had uploaded everything to encrypted cloud storage and mailed a physical backup to a former college roommate with instructions. But that wouldn't help her if Bellgrave's men caught her. A news alert on her phone caught her attention. Bellgrave National announces major acquisition. The Harrington deal had been made public with the signing ceremony scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. This explained the urgency. Henry Bellgrave was accelerating his plans, trying to complete the deal before any damaging information could emerge. Eleanor noticed the SUV parked at the edge of the lot, waiting. She needed a diversion, a way to lose them. An idea formed as she observed a group of long-haul truckers preparing to depart. Approaching one headed north, away from her actual destination, she crafted a quick story about an abusive ex-boyfriend following her. The trucker, a grandfatherly man named Earl, agreed to let her ride along to the next major truck stop 50 miles up the highway. As Earl's semi pulled out, Eleanor ducked down in the passenger seat, watching through the side mirror as the SUV began to follow. Once they were on the highway, she used Earl's CB radio to make a call to the only person she could think of who might help, Martin, her supervisor. Despite being a company man, Martin had always been kind to her. More importantly, he was one of the few people who knew about her father's case from first-hand experience. "Martin, it's Eleanor," she said when he answered his home phone, keeping her voice low, so Earl couldn't hear the details. "I need help. The Bellgraves are after me because of what I found in the archives." There was a long pause before Martin responded, his voice strained. "Eleanor, I can't help you. They know everything. I had to tell them." The betrayal hit her hard. "You told them about the ledger? About me?" "I've worked for the Bellgraves for 40 years, Martin said, regret evident in his tone. "I have a pension, a family. I couldn't risk it all. I'm sorry. My father trusted people like you," Eleanor said bitterly. "That's why he died in disgrace." "Eleanor, listen to me," Martin said urgently. "Henry has taken Alexander to the lake house on Crescent Road. He suspects you two are working together. Whatever you're planning, it's over. The Bellgraves always win." She ended the call, her mind racing. Alexander was being held against his will. That much was clear. And now she knew where. The question was whether she should risk trying to help him or focus on getting the evidence to authorities. At the next truck stop, Eleanor thanked Earl and slipped away while her pursuers were still watching the highway. She used cash to pay for a ride share under a false name, heading not to the backup motel, but toward Crescent Road and the lake house. Her father had always told her that doing the right thing was rarely easy and never safe. As she watched the dark countryside pass by, Eleanor knew she was making a dangerous choice. But abandoning Alexander to face his father's wrath alone wasn't an option. Not when he had risked everything to help her expose the truth. The Bellgrave lake house was more modest than Alexander had expected from a family property. A sturdy timber structure nestled among pine trees with a wide deck overlooking the water. Under different circumstances, it might have been peaceful. Reynolds had driven him there in silence, confiscating his phone and wallet upon arrival. 2 additional security men were already present, converting the vacation home into an effective prison. "Your father's instructions are to keep you here until he calls tomorrow afternoon," Reynolds explained, his professional demeanor never wavering. "There's food in the refrigerator and a change of clothes in the bedroom. I suggest you make yourself comfortable." Alexander watched the security chief carefully. Reynolds had known him since childhood, had even taught teenage Alexander to fish during rare family vacations. If anyone in his father's employ might be sympathetic, it was him. "Reynolds," Alexander said quietly, ensuring the other guards couldn't hear. "You know what my father is capable of, what he's done." Reynolds' expression remained impassive. "I follow orders, Mr. Bellgrave. I suggest you remember your responsibilities as well." "Responsibilities?" Alexander stepped closer. "My father framed an innocent man. Destroyed his life. Now he's going to do the same to that man's daughter. Is that the kind of order you're comfortable following?" Something flickered in Reynolds' eyes. "Doubt, perhaps. Your father built this town, provided jobs, stability. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good. That's what we tell ourselves, isn't it?" Alexander pressed. "That the ends justify the means, that our comfort, our position is worth someone else's suffering." Reynolds checked his watch, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "I'll be outside. Don't try anything foolish." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Mr. Bellgrave, I always thought you were different from your father. More conscientious. Perhaps that's why he worries about your readiness to lead." Left alone, Alexander searched the house for anything that might help his situation. The landline had been disconnected and the security men were stationed at every potential exit. His father had planned this containment well. In the study, he found older family photographs, his grandfather with political figures from decades past, his father as a young man standing proudly outside the bank. The Bellgrave legacy captured in carefully staged moments. Behind one photo, he discovered a wall safe. His grandfather's, most likely. On impulse, he tried his father's birth date as the combination. Nothing. Then his grandfather's. Still nothing. Finally, he tried the date Bellgrave National was founded, the date inscribed on the cornerstone of the bank building. The safe clicked open. Inside was another ledger, newer than the one Eleanor had found, and a USB drive. Alexander quickly examined the ledger. It contained records similar to the older one, but with entries as recent as the previous month. The Harrington acquisition featured prominently with notations about incentives paid to key decision-makers. The USB drive contained digital copies of the same records along with something unexpected, scanned copies of letters between his grandfather and father discussing contingency plans should their methods ever be exposed. One paragraph caught Alexander's attention: in the event of public discovery, all records can be presented as the unauthorized actions of a single executive. The designated individual will accept full responsibility with guarantees of family support and eventual rehabilitation. This protocol has been successfully implemented twice in our history. A scapegoat strategy, already planned decades in advance. Alexander felt a chill as he realized what this meant. If Eleanor succeeded in exposing the evidence, his father already had a contingency in place. Someone would take the fall, protecting the Bellgrave name and the bank itself. The question was who had been designated for that role. Alexander carefully photographed the documents using an old Polaroid camera he found in a desk drawer. Not ideal, but the only option available. He then returned everything to the safe exactly as he had found it. Evidence in hand, he now needed to find a way out of his confinement. From the window, he studied the security setup. Reynolds was on the deck while the other two men patrolled the perimeter. All were armed, though discreetly. His father was taking no chances. A movement in the trees beyond the property caught his attention. A flash of light, quickly extinguished. Someone was out there watching the house. Alexander's first thought was more of his father's security detail, but the furtive nature of the movement suggested otherwise. Eleanor. It had to be. She had somehow evaded her pursuers and found the lake house. The realization filled him with both hope and dread. Hope that they might still expose the truth. Dread that she was putting herself in danger. Alexander needed to create a diversion, something that would draw the security team's attention away from the side of the property where he had spotted the movement. The house's aging electrical system gave him an idea. In the basement, he located the circuit breaker panel. With a deep breath, he flipped the main switch, plunging the house into darkness. The reaction was immediate. Shouts from the security team, flashlights being activated, Reynolds calling for a perimeter check. In the confusion, Alexander slipped out through a basement window, staying low as he made his way toward the tree line where he had seen the light. "Eleanor," he whispered into the darkness. A hand grabbed his arm, pulling him deeper into the trees. Eleanor's face appeared in the dim moonlight, her expression a mix of determination and fear. "Your father's men are following me," she said quickly. "I lost them temporarily, but they'll track me here eventually." "How did you find this place?" "Martin told me. Right after he admitted betraying us to your father." She glanced back at the house where the security team was restoring power and searching the grounds. "We don't have much time." Alexander showed her the Polaroids he had taken. More evidence. Recent. And a contingency plan to blame everything on a single scapegoat if they're exposed. Eleanor examined the photos in the dim light. "This is everything we need, but we have to get it to the authorities before your father implements this contingency plan." A shout from near the house indicated the security team had discovered Alexander's absence. Flashlight beams began sweeping the surrounding forest. My car is hidden about half a mile down the road, Eleanor whispered. If we can reach it, going somewhere, Mr. Bellgrave. They froze as Reynolds emerged from the darkness behind them. His weapon was drawn but pointed at the ground. The security chief's expression was unreadable as he surveyed the two of them. Reynolds, Alexander said carefully. You know what's happening here isn't right. Reynolds was silent for a long moment, the flashlight beams from the other security men drawing closer through the trees. Your father will be disappointed, he finally said. Then, surprisingly, he holstered his weapon. You have about 5 minutes before they find you. The service road behind the property leads to the highway. He handed Alexander a set of car keys. My vehicle is parked at the end of that road. I'll report it stolen in the morning. Alexander stared at him in shock. Why? Reynolds' professional mask slipped just for a moment. I've served your family for 25 years, Mr. Bellgrave. I've done things I'm not proud of in that service. Perhaps it's time someone broke the cycle. He looked at Eleanor. Your father was a good man, Miss Pierce. He didn't deserve what happened to him. Before either could respond, Reynolds turned and called out to his team, directing their search in the opposite direction. We can't waste this chance, Eleanor said, tugging Alexander's arm. Let's go. As they hurried through the dark forest, Alexander felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom. For the first time in his life, he was making a choice based not on family expectations or legacy, but on what he believed was right. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Henry Bellgrave was not a man accustomed to failure. As he sat in his office at the bank, waiting for confirmation that both his son and Eleanor Pierce had been contained, he reviewed the Harrington acquisition documents one final time. By tomorrow afternoon, the deal would be signed, expanding Bellgrave influence beyond anything his father or grandfather had achieved. His phone rang. Not Reynolds with the expected update, but Martin from Records. Sir. Martin's voice trembled slightly. There's something you should know. When Ms. Pierce accessed the secure room, she wasn't alone. There were irregularities in the security logs. Someone had entered earlier that day using executive credentials. Henry sat up straighter. Whose credentials? Board member access, sir. Specifically. Mr. Harrington's credentials. Henry felt a cold certainty settle over him. William Harrington, the aging founder of Harrington Financial, had initially resisted the acquisition. His sudden reversal weeks ago had been unexpected, but welcome. Now, it seemed there might have been more to that change of heart. Find Harrington, Henry ordered immediately. After ending the call, he unlocked his private safe and removed a small recording device, another of the Bellgrave insurance policies. Every major negotiation was secretly recorded, providing leverage if needed. He played back his final meeting with Harrington, listening carefully. Your bank is in trouble, William, Henry's recorded voice said smoothly. Those loans to the Miller Development Project are toxic. When that becomes public, your stock will collapse. Harrington's voice, weary but defiant, those loans were your recommendation, Henry. Your bank underwrote half of them. But your name is on the paperwork, your signature, your board's approval. We were merely advisors. A long pause, then Harrington, what do you want? Sell to us at our offered price. We will absorb those loans, restructure them quietly. Your legacy remains intact, your shareholders protected. Blackmail, Henry. After 30 years of friendship. Business, William. Just business. The recording ended. Henry sat back considering the implications. If Harrington had accessed the secure archives, if he had found evidence of how the toxic loans had been deliberately structured to pressure him into selling. His phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. Bellgrave, he answered curtly. Mr. Bellgrave, this is Special Agent Donovan, Federal Banking Commission. The voice was professionally neutral. I'm calling to inform you that we've received concerning documentation regarding Bellgrave National Bank's lending practices and the pending Harrington acquisition. We'll be arriving tomorrow morning to initiate a formal investigation. Henry maintained his composure with decades of practice. I see. May I ask the nature of these allegations? Fraud, coercion, falsification of financial documents, and possible RICO violations. Mr. William Harrington has provided quite a detailed statement. Harrington. The pieces fell into place. Not just Eleanor Pierce and his son, but Harrington himself had turned against him. Of course, Agent Donovan, Bellgrave National has nothing to hide. We'll cooperate fully. After the call ended, Henry sat motionless, his mind racing through contingencies. The scapegoat protocol would need to be activated immediately. All evidence would need to be redirected toward the designated individual. He picked up the phone to call his attorney, but hesitated as another call came in. Reynolds. Sir. The security chief's voice was tight. There's been a development at the lake house. Your son, he's gone. So is Miss Pierce. What do you mean gone? You had 3 men there. They escaped during a power outage. We're searching the area, but... Reynolds paused. Sir, they had the contents of the safe. The contingency documents. Henry felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. With those documents, Alexander and Eleanor could prove not just the fraud itself, but the premeditated nature of the Bellgrave family's actions across generations. Find them, he ordered. Whatever it takes. But even as he said it, Henry Bellgrave knew that for the first time in his life, events were spiraling beyond his control. The carefully constructed Bellgrave dynasty was beginning to crumble. Dawn was breaking as Alexander and Reynolds' SUV pulled into the federal building in the state capitol, 3 hours from Ravenbrook. Eleanor had spent the drive organizing their evidence, the photographs of both ledgers, the contingency documents, the files Alexander had copied from the bank servers. Once we do this, there's no going back, she said as they sat in the parking lot, the evidence spread between them. Your family, the bank, Ravenbrook itself. Everything will change. Alexander looked at the building before them, the symbol of a system his family had manipulated for generations. It already has changed. We just need to make it official. Inside, they were met by Special Agent Donovan, a serious woman in her 50s with the watchful eyes of someone who had seen every type of financial crime imaginable. Mr. Bellgrave, she said, shaking his hand. I admit when my office received your email last night, we were skeptical. It's not every day that a banking heir accuses his own family of systematic fraud. I understand, Alexander replied. But the evidence speaks for itself. Donovan nodded to Eleanor. And you must be Ms. Pierce. Your father's case has been mentioned in our investigation. Eleanor felt a surge of emotion. After all these years, her father's name would finally be cleared. You already have an investigation underway. William Harrington contacted us 3 days ago with concerns about the acquisition, Donovan explained, leading them to a conference room. His evidence was compelling, but incomplete. Yours appears to fill in the historical context and current practices. For the next several hours, they presented their evidence piece by piece. Alexander explained the banking practices, the manipulation of the Harrington deal, the decades of systematic elimination of whistleblowers. Eleanor detailed her father's case and how it connected to the larger pattern. Donovan and her team listened, occasionally asking clarifying questions, their expressions growing more grave as the full picture emerged. The contingency plan is particularly damning, Donovan said, examining the Polaroids Alexander had taken. It demonstrates premeditation across decades. My father will implement that plan as soon as he realizes he can't contain this, Alexander warned. Someone at the bank will be designated to take the fall for everything. Donovan nodded. Which is why we've already dispatched agents to Bellgrave National with a warrant to secure all records. No one in or out. No documents destroyed. Eleanor checked her watch. The Harrington signing is scheduled for 2 o'clock today. It won't be happening, Donovan assured her. Not with federal agents currently occupying the bank's headquarters. As they wrapped up their presentation, Donovan regarded them both with a mixture of respect and curiosity. I have to ask, Mr. Bellgrave. Why? Why turn against your own family, your own inheritance? Alexander considered the question carefully. Legacy, he finally said. Just not the one my father envisioned. Some legacies aren't worth preserving. As they left the federal building, both physically and emotionally exhausted, Alexander's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Cautiously, he answered, Alexander. His father's voice, strained but controlled. What have you done? What should have been done years ago, Alexander replied. It's over, father. Federal agents are at the bank. The Harrington deal is cancelled. Everything is coming to light. A long silence, then. You've destroyed generations of work. For what? Some misplaced sense of morality. That woman's revenge quest. For the truth, Alexander said simply. Something the Bellgrave name hasn't been associated with for a very long time. Truth, Henry scoffed. Truth doesn't build empires. Truth doesn't create prosperity. Power does. Control does. Your grandfather understood that. I understood that. You were supposed to be the next in line, Alexander. The heir. I'm making my own legacy now, Alexander said. Goodbye, father. As he ended the call, Eleanor touched his arm gently. Are you okay? Alexander took a deep breath, feeling the weight of generations of Bellgrave expectations finally lifting from his shoulders. I think I will be. For the first time. 1 month later, the Ravenbrook Gazette's headline said it all, Bellgrave Empire Falls. Federal indictments filed against banking dynasty. Below the fold was a smaller headline, Robert Pierce exonerated. Bank whistleblower posthumously cleared. Eleanor sat at her father's grave. The newspaper spread before her. We did it, Dad, she said softly, touching the headstone. Your name is cleared. Everyone knows the truth now. The federal investigation had moved with surprising speed, uncovering even more evidence once they had access to all Bellgrave records. Henry Bellgrave and several board members had been arrested, the bank placed into receivership, and the full extent of the family's criminal activities laid bare for the public. Alexander had cooperated fully, providing testimony against his father in exchange for immunity. The Bellgrave mansion had been seized as part of the asset forfeiture. The family fortune, largely frozen, pending further investigation. Eleanor heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Alexander approaching, looking different than he had at the bank. More casual clothing, less rigid posture, the bearing of a man finding his own path rather than following a predetermined one. I thought I might find you here, he said, placing flowers beside her own. How are you holding up? Better than I expected, Eleanor admitted. The foundation is taking shape. We've already had dozens of applications for the Whistleblower Legal Support Fund. The Pierce Foundation had been Alexander's idea, using what remained of his personal assets to create an organization that would support corporate whistleblowers and fight financial fraud. Eleanor had agreed to run it, putting her accounting skills to a use her father would have approved of. My father's attorney called, Alexander said, sitting beside her on the cemetery bench. He's still refusing a plea deal, insisting he'll be vindicated at trial. Sounds like him, Eleanor observed. Unable to accept that his time is over. Alexander nodded, looking out over the cemetery toward Ravenbrook in the distance. The town was changing. With the Bellgrave influence removed, new businesses were emerging, new leadership taking shape. The transition was painful for many who had depended on the bank. But there was also a sense of opportunity, of a more equitable future. I've been thinking about what legacy really means, Alexander said after a moment. My family spent generations building a legacy of power at any cost. Your father chose a different legacy. Integrity, even when it cost him everything. Eleanor looked at him, this man who had walked away from wealth and position to do what was right, who had helped her find justice for her father after all these years. Legacies aren't inherited, she said. They're chosen. Every day. With every decision. Alexander reached for her hand, and she took it. A gesture of shared purpose, of possibilities neither of them had imagined a month ago. In the distance, the former Bellgrave bank building stood in the center of town, its name already removed from the facade. The eagle above the entrance, once a symbol of the family's power, now seemed more like a harbinger of freedom, a reminder that no dynasty lasts forever, and that truth, however deeply buried, eventually finds its way to light. The ledger that had started it all was now evidence in a federal case, its pages testifying to decades of corruption. But it had served its purpose, exposing the past and changing the future, for Ravenbrook, for Eleanor and her father's memory, and for Alexander, who had finally found a legacy worth building. The end.